Welcome inside another episode of Point to the Passer. First things first, I'd like to just get ahead of any media reports or leaks and say that Jonathan and I are not transferring outside of the Carolina family. We're not taking our talents to the NBA on TNT, and we never intended to do either of those things. We're still right here covering all things UNC during the offseason. And at this point, if I'm being honest, y'all, as we enter a new season of Point to the Passer, we'd pretty much be considered veterans on the team in this day and age. So I think we've got that going for us too. So yes, season 3 officially kicks off with today's episode, given it's our first recording after the national championship game. Thank you everyone for being here. Whether it's your first time checking us out or if you're a loyal listener, you know who you are, and we appreciate it immensely. Jonathan, great to see you, my friend. New season of Point to the Passer, same NIL nonsense to start with. Lots to get to today.
Well, here's the thing, Craig. You didn't get my paperwork that I sent in because I'm in the portal. I'm reworking my NIL
I was dreading
deal.
this news. I don't know how much I can pay you, man. We don't even have a sponsor. I'm broke over here. I got nothing. Just good vibes.
It doesn't mean that I'm leaving. I want to come back. We're going to get into all the nuances of the portal. Just always surprises, doesn't it? There's new wrinkles. It feels like every year, but it is good to start a new season. It's fun to talk about just everything that's happening right now. In some ways, there's maybe even more action and activity happening right now than even during the season. And there's within 2 weeks or so since we talked last, we've had multiple commitments to UNC. We've had multiple guys also transfer out. So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. The last episode we put out was just before the Final Four. We all know how that game ended up between Houston and Duke. We'll touch on that a little bit later in the episode just to share our thoughts on some of the Final Four and with Florida winning it all. Some interesting choke jobs and collapses by Duke first and then Houston in the national championship. So we'll do a little recap on that. But we do want to first focus on a couple of the new guys who have come in. We focused on Henry Vesar and Jonathan Powell previously in the last episode, and now we've got two incomers in Jaren Stevenson and Kyan Evans. That is a power forward who's 6'11", and Jaren Stevenson, local to Chapel Hill, local to North Carolina, and then Kyan Evans, Colorado State guard, who you may recognize from dropping about 23 points on Memphis in the first round in that 5-12 upset, and then putting up a solid double digits and 10 points versus number 4 Maryland, almost pulling off that upset to get to the Sweet 16. So, Jonathan, like we said, a lot to get to. Which one of these guys do you want to start with? I'll leave it up to you.
Let's start with Evans. He was the first one to commit. When we had talked last, I remember talking about some of my frustration from a fan perspective of feeling like we were cycling through different point guard options after Cadeau transfers out. And there's just a lot that happened really quick. And I think they have gotten some credit, but I don't know if Tanner, especially, and Hubert Davis and staff have gotten enough credit for how they've pivoted as quickly as they have this year compared to last year. And with Tanner coming in, you got to give him a lot of credit for just how strategically it feels like they've approached this. Again, from looking from the outside in, and we try to talk about things that are publicly reported because we know. With local reporters and teams, folks with sites like Inside Carolina, they go through a lot of just painstaking process to get the information that they do. And each of these sites also has paywalled information. So definitely recommend checking that out if you want kind of in-depth information that's not public. But all that to say that they were pivoting really fast. And it seems like they have a board now of guys that they're looking at, and they're able to pivot to the next guy depending on the situation. So Kyan was one of those guys. That was after, I think we had talked about Nate George that day that Vesar committed, 30 minutes before George commits to Syracuse. Really quick on that. So Sherelle McMillan on the Coast to Coast podcast for Inside Carolina talked a little bit recently about the fact that George actually reached out to Carolina and pitched him playing at UNC, playing point guard, and UNC liked what they heard. He has some similarities to Cadeau just in his ability to facilitate and really lead a team. And then just the way that process went, they were feeling really good about it, felt like it was probably moving in the direction of a commitment that day. And then he ends up at Syracuse. So all that to me just shows like how volatile, right, the portal can be, how unpredictable it can be, that you have somebody who reaches out pitching to come play for you and then they move in a different direction. But let's get to Evans. So Evans is somebody that maybe wasn't the first on their board, but he's definitely somebody who's rising in terms of his stock. Like you said, Craig, in the NCAA tournament, he absolutely went off in that first round game against Memphis. The biggest thing that stands out to me about Evans right away is he's a shooter. He's 6'2", he's a point guard out of Kansas City. So he shot 40% both off the catch and off the dribble, which is pretty unique for a shooter. He was around 45% for the year and really caught fire even beyond that percentage down the stretch. Has a really pure stroke. He's somebody who also has really deep range. I watched a little bit of the Mountain West tournament, and in one of those games, he hit a three from the logo with the shot clock going down. That had to be at least 30, maybe 35 feet out. So you like not just his shot mechanics, but I also really like his confidence, the swagger he plays with, and his competitiveness. But those are the biggest things that he brings. Now, he is a point guard, but it's the shooting more than anything else, although he can play make a little bit. He's 20+% in terms of assist rate, but not going to be the same type of vision and assist rate that you saw from Elliott last year. So it'd be a different situation. I think Hubert is really going to have to change the way that they play to best not just accentuate what Evans brings, but what this new set of guys brings together. I guess the last thing with him is he, as a point guard, would bring the ball up for Colorado State, but then almost immediately pass it off and get into their action through other players. Their best player, Nick Clifford, is a wing power forward who was also their leading assist guy on the season. So I like that too, just because he's played with big guys who are really good facilitators. And the way this team sets up right now, Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar would seem to be the primary facilitators, or at least the most skilled in terms of their passing and vision. So that's potentially an option for Hubert Davis in terms of looking at how you get the facilitation and playmaking that you need. But yeah, this guy's a shooter. He's got edge. He's got a lot of confidence. He wants to play on a big stage, and now he's going to get his chance at UNC.
Yeah, super excited on Kyan Evans coming from Colorado State. Obviously, um, Cade Tyson last year struggled in his jump from Belmont. We've talked about that. It's been well documented. Colorado State, a little more competitive in terms of bigger teams that they've played, obviously in the NCAA tournament. Like we said, matched up well against Memphis and Maryland. Do you carry any of those concerns coming from non-major conference to a major conference with Kyan in terms of his shooting ability? And in the past, shooting 40% is great, but we've seen that number drop a little bit at times when players have come into UNC, or not just drop, but sometimes been streaky.
Yeah, it's a good question. In terms of the shot itself, I mean, he's got such a quick release that I feel like that translates no matter where you go. It's also very effortless in terms of how he shoots it. So, in terms of the shot itself, I don't have concerns there. The question is more when you get to the bright lights of UNC, which is always just at a different level, how does that impact your confidence? How do you adjust to that?
Right.
So I think that's always going to be a question for anybody transitioning up. And even we've seen it with guys who are transitioning from other schools within the conference, right? Like it's something that we've seen quite a bit over the years. So that's a fair question. Tar Heel Illustrated, Andrew Jones, on one of their podcasts was talking about the fact that when he transitioned to Colorado State, that it was a little bit overwhelming for him initially that first year playing in front of their crowds there. Apparently, they have a really rowdy, engaged fan base, but it's still a big difference jumping from that size of crowd to now 20,000 people at the Smith Center. And then you talk about some of the biggest stages throughout the year. Um, so I'm not concerned. It's just a question that he has to answer. But what I like about him and what you saw from him in that game against Memphis is that's a pretty big stage, right? Even though the crowd isn't what it's going to be for a Duke Carolina game in person, everyone's eyes are on these games. And he stepped up in one of the biggest stages. I do just like the swagger that he plays with. So I think he can do it. But in terms of what we'll talk about with roster construction for this team, you do want to have some other guys just in terms of insurance in case he struggles early or it takes him a little while to get going or he has some ups and downs. But I don't anticipate it. I do think he's going to be somebody that can provide that shooting punch right away.
Yeah, and we lacked that a little bit. Honestly, kind of the last, maybe not last 2 years. Cormac and Harrison really stepped up a couple years back, and then last year I'd say RJ obviously had a little less of a productive year than he did when it was just him. We did have Ian streaky at times, had a nice 20 plus point game stretch. But my point being, I think it'll be really nice to have a pure shooter. It's the guys like Brady Manick who are quick trigger, Cam Johnson that come to mind, Justin Jackson. I'm not saying he'll reach those numbers, but when you think pure 3-point shooters, those are the top three for me in the last decade or so. So hyped to see what he can do, and hopefully he will adjust. But I think that, Jonathan, to be fair too, that's always going to be a question going forward, right? They don't have even more than 1 year nowadays a lot of times to adjust, and so it's always going to be new school, new arena, new staff, etc. And that I think that just is what it is. But you're right. I think he'll be hopefully set up for success in Hubert's system and be able to run that point position, get comfortable, but also get his open looks.
Yeah, it's not as much a Cayenne question as you're right, as a players coming in general. And if they run things, not the same offense that Colorado State ran per se, but if they use him maybe not always as the primary facilitator, then you can also get the ball into other guys' hands, right? And you have Seth Trimble out there who is technically a combo guard. We haven't really seen him in as much of a point guard role, but he talked about in talking to Adam and Jones on the Carolina Insider podcast. I'm just going through all the podcasts here in terms of
Man's a listener.
there's a lot of good stuff out there. But I love that they had him on right after things were public that he was coming back, and he talked about the fact that he's looking forward to the opportunity to show more of that side of his game. And so I think the idea with Hubert is you're kind of going back to what they had with RJ and Caleb, where you have two guys who can they're both combo guards where they both can play on and off the ball, and both handle the ball. And so I think that takes some of the weight off of kind of potentially, along with, again, I think you really want to run things through the big guys who have that great vision and passing ability, which we can talk more about later on. But yeah, so he brings a lot. He's very efficient. So it's not just the shooting, but he's also was pretty efficient at the rim. He can get to the rim. It's not going to be, I mean, I do have a concern about this team of right now, the backcourt. Outside of Seth, do you have guys that can get to the rim off the dribble, create their own shot, get a bucket when you need it when the shot clock is winding down and things break down? That's a fair question, but he still was efficient enough getting to the rim. At times, he would get a little hung up when he would get there. Sometimes it looked like he predetermined what he wanted to do and get stuck. So that's something to work on. But I do think having somebody like Vasar, who is a true post presence, that yes, Clifford was a great player, but this is different in terms of having Vasar and then Wilson and having Stevenson. Like you have a lot of options. So I think that interior will really, really help him in that regard. So I'm excited for him. The hope is now that you can get some other shooters around him to balance things out so that the defense isn't just keying in on his shooting, right? Trimble's obviously got to improve his shooting percentages. That's a huge concern. I would go beyond question, right? Just from what
Mhm.
we've seen, it's a
Mhm.
concern, and Seth knows it. Something he talked about as well, that he kind of embraces that, uses the criticism as fuel to get ready for the next year. Jonathan Powell will give you some of that too from the outside. Also has deep range, pretty efficient for a freshman last year at West Virginia. But you're really looking for probably one more shooter as well. But this was big. This was huge to get a shooter, especially next to Seth Trimble, who his strengths are getting to the rim, getting out in transition. So it balances out what Seth already brings to the team.
For sure. As of a couple days ago, the portal has officially closed for new players to enter. That does not mean that rosters are complete by any means. There's a lot still up in the air. A lot of players testing the NBA draft waters. Boogie Fland is a name that you and I have talked about that we'll touch on a little bit later in this episode as well. But talking to some of those big guys now, we covered Vasar and what he brings. 7-footer, big body, can shoot the three, really fluid, good hands, able to get to the rim. No bad blood with Jaron Stevenson, right? As of a couple years ago, he commits to Alabama from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. You would have hoped that, he comes here the first time, but he gave Nate Oates a run down there. And we're going to touch on just a little bit of what Jaron actually brings. If you're familiar with the Alabama system, over the years, you've seen it. They drop threes on threes on threes. They've done it in the NCAA tournament to teams. They've done it to Carolina a couple times outside of the NCAA tournament, once in the NCAA tournament. So Jaron's fit here is less of a 3-point shooter. He's more of a big body power forward that we hope to utilize down low in conjunction with Henry Vasar. So let's dive into Jaron and how you think he could best be utilized and why you think he's such an important asset to this team.
Yeah, I mean, the first part, like you said, he was obviously heavily recruited by Hubert Davis and UNC the first time around. And so that just speaks to the importance of maintaining these relationships. And even when things don't go in the direction, whether it's the player or the player's camp or family or the team that you wanted it to, that this can come back around. We're just going to see this. This is going to be more common. We saw this with Harrison Ingram, who was also really highly recruited by Carolina, comes in as a junior. So same thing with Jaron. Um, I really like this pickup a lot. I mean, it was really looking like Cannon Catchings from BYU was trending in that direction. He's more of, I would say, a three than a four positionally, whereas Jaron is much more of a four power forward than he is anything else. Although he did start at the three for Alabama and played a lot on the perimeter. But for me, I think things that weren't tapped into as much in terms of his game, he has really good footwork around the rim. He also is very versatile. You can get him in a lot of spaces. Um, work him in the mid post, and he's able to get to the basket in a lot of different ways. So he's able to put pressure on the rim a lot more maybe than I think he showed at Alabama, where he was asked to shoot a lot of threes. And at least in college, he has not been a great 3-point shooter. He was about almost exactly the same number of attempts and makes, like low 30s and around 100 attempts, so 30% or so, both years. You'd like to see that get up a little bit, but if anything, I think my hope is with this team, he gives you a really solid backup at the four to Caleb Wilson. You have a pretty unique 1-2 punch there in terms of their
Mhm.
size, athleticism, and versatility. He's not as athletic as Caleb, but he's plenty athletic and versatile enough to defend multiple positions. And I love his defense too. I mean, he's walled up against some of the best big guys in the SEC over the last 2 years and defends really well. So he gives you additional support there on the interior defensively and somebody that can rebound, can get to the rim. You can even run him off of some actions where dribble handoffs where he's getting downhill, getting to the rim. He's really patient in doing that, and he creates separation really well, but he also embraces contact. So he's somebody overall that I think has a pretty good feel for the game. You can tell that he's a coach's son, not once but twice. Both of his parents were his coaches at Seaforth High School and have been around basketball, professionally for his dad in Korea. So the fact that they both played, he's been around basketball his entire life. That really shows. So I think you get a guy with a high floor, somebody with a high IQ, and can do damage around the rim, but is versatile in some other ways. I think he's got a mid-range game probably that he wasn't able to show at Alabama because they shoot two mid-range shots per season or something like that. Like everything is threes or at the rim.
Ridiculous. And we've seen
Um,
it. Been hurt from it.
yeah, so I think his ability to really be a true power forward is something that I love to see them use him more that way. David Sisk with Tar Heel Illustrated, way back when he was like a junior in high school, was talking about how he had educated feet. And what he meant by that was, again, you see the coaching in terms of the repetitions, the footwork, the practice. He's a super skilled guy. I'm really excited because I'm excited for Caleb Wilson. You never know with a freshman how it's going to go in terms of the transition. How do they start? Are there going to be ups and downs? So you have this guy who is more than just a security blanket at that position, but somebody that can perform at a really high level. And in watching the tournament, right, watching the Floridas or some of these other teams, they would just send in waves of big guys who it doesn't feel like you have a drop off in terms of their level of play. And I feel like now you have that with Stevenson next to Vasar and Caleb Wilson. That is a really strong three. Maybe you get Lubin back as a fourth. That would be a really strong quartet of bigs for Carolina.
Yeah, it's incredible not to feel like right now we have to worry about that front court. It's just such a 180 from last season. Missing Baycott so much from the year before, just unbelievable. I think we recognized it, but then when you saw it in action, how you just weren't able to space the floor. RJ couldn't get open. It caused all sorts of disruption all season long. So one thing that I think will benefit these guards is just having that front court down low and spacing everything out, allowing them to get the shot. And then it's just a matter of ball looks better when it goes in the basket. So super stoked on how this roster is coming together so far. Let's talk a little bit about some other portal options that are out there because we're hopefully not quite done yet. There's the NBA draft coming up, but a lot of testing going on right now. People getting feedback. Drake Powell is one of those. He just announced a couple days ago that he would be going toward the NBA draft. We'll get around to that, and also Ian Jackson entering the transfer portal ends up landing at St. John's, and then we'll touch on Lubin here shortly. But who's your next target for this team to really come together? Who are a list of a few names that you think Carolina might be after in terms of getting that extra guard or an extra shooter?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest priority right now is with Drake Powell announcing, and there's a lot of speculation just based on his announcement and the way that it was presented that he's 100% focused on the NBA. That does that mean that he's not coming back? And we just don't know. So he's it's an open question, but he can come back if he chooses to. So this is just one of those things similar to what we've seen in the past, where this has happened with guys like Pete Nance is one that comes to mind. We've had other guys, I think, over the years who've gone through the draft process and then withdrawn. He has until May 28th, which I think is a week to 10 days after the combine, to say that he's coming back to school. So that is not a guarantee. So they really need to make sure that they're operating, which has been consistent in terms of their messaging, that we're operating like Drake is gone, that he's going pro. And that's the way they need to operate. So they need to find a wing. Andrei Stojakovic is somebody who's in the portal who they were tied to last year. He was actually one of the alternate options if Cade Tyson doesn't commit. Um, and somebody who just blew up at Cal this last year in
Mhm.
terms of his scoring. He could certainly be more efficient, but when you have the usage rate and you so much is on your shoulders in terms of, let's say, the entire offense and watching a few Cal games, that there's a reason why he wasn't as efficient as I think he can be. But dynamic score, he can score in a lot of different ways. The thing with him is that, like a lot of these cases, typically there's a school that gets you to go into the portal and is in the lead. It seems like that was the case with Vasar for Carolina from Arizona. With Stojakovic, it seems like that's Illinois. He visited um, it was Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday was the visit. And so there's a sense that he's going to commit to Illinois. But as of recording right now at precisely 3:16 on Thursday afternoon, he is not committed. I haven't checked my phone in the last 15 minutes. So as far as I know, he is not committed. Um, and so you're saying there's a chance. As a fan, I'm always optimistic. It doesn't seem like a big possibility unless this drags out. And then if Carolina can get him on a call, get him to campus, maybe he doesn't even need to go to campus because he's already, he came to UNC, Cal played at Carolina last year. Anyway, so that still feels like a long shot, but he would be somebody who would be dynamic, who would bring something different than Drake. He's much more of a offensive player, and he would give you an alpha scorer right away. And somebody just with his lineage and his dad Peja being known as a 3-point specialist in the NBA for so many years with the Kings. He's been lower in terms of percentage on threes, kind of low 30s last year, but you just look at the shot, you can see that translating. And again, I'm trying not to get carried away because it's not a high possibility.
Mhm.
It's a very low possibility. But if you had him next to Kyan Evans, and then you have Jonathan Powell coming off the bench, all of a sudden you have three really strong shooters and one just dynamic scorer. So he's one name that's come up. Another that always seems to come up, and by always just the last couple of years, because portal season has just been wild these last couple of years, is Jameer Watkins at Florida State, who went the draft process, withdrew from the process, was in the portal, ends up coming back to Florida State. He's back in the portal, he's back in the draft, so he'd be another one that you'd have to wait on and kind of see how that process plays out. But at 6'7", his level of length and athleticism is dynamic. He's also not a pure 3-point shooter, like low 30s this last year, but he's a scorer. And as you know, like when we've watched him play Carolina, he always seems to light up. There's something about that. We've had some success with guys who've absolutely just lit us up and then putting on the Carolina jersey doing pretty well. Cam Johnson comes to mind as one.
Mhm.
But he's versatile. I think he would be, it's going to be hard to get him. And it does feel like he would be expensive, potentially a bidding war type of situation if it comes to that. But he's somebody that can play on the wing and you can play him at, guard multiple positions. You can use him in multiple ways, would give you a lead scorer. So that's another name. I think we'll probably see a few other names pop up here of guys who are still either just entered the portal or still in the portal that they're looking at. But those are the two that are the most popular just in terms of from fan discourse of these are the guys that we want. Ideally for me, Drake comes back. Again, he's focused on the NBA as he should be, and he's a fringe first round, early second round pick probably at this point. So there's a good chance that he does stay in the draft, which honestly would benefit Carolina and Drake. It would be a good thing. That's
Mhm.
like it, you get these guys that we complain that they're not one and done when they come to Carolina. Now this guy, has a chance to go to the league after 1 year at UNC. That's a really positive thing. Yes, it's disappointing because I love watching him play. He's such a Carolina guy, and I think he could really explode next year. But that would be the best case scenario, and that is not off the table. So those are kind of the three names, again, more from a fan perspective that have been thrown around. Stojakovic at least has the previous ties to Carolina, so depending on what happens with Illinois, that could be a possibility, although I still feel like it's a pretty remote possibility at this point.
Yeah, and I mentioned Boogie Fland is another name. Again, this is not a get your hopes up kind of thing. This is a very long shot. Also, very solid player at Arkansas, heads to announce for the NBA draft, but does have flexibility to come back to school if needed. Thoughts on Boogie?
I love the name, right?
Yeah,
We
it's
talk about,
great.
I
It's
mean,
great.
fantastic, fantastic name, Boogie Fland, Stepniak High School, same high school as RJ Davis in White Plains, New York. So you got the RJ connection. He's in the draft. He's focused on the draft too. So we're at this challenging point where you're waiting for a lot of the best guys that are left are going through the draft process. So it could be a wait on him. But if he does come out of the draft and come back to college, Carolina recruited him heavily in high school. There wasn't really an open path to playing time with Elliot Cadeau being there. Now Elliot transfers out, and maybe Boogie can slot in. If he did come in terms of the fit, I think it would be fantastic. Um, I think it would be interesting in terms of the dynamic with him and Kyan Evans, just because Kyan's coming in with a clear path to playing time. Right now, he is the presumptive point guard, going to probably play a lot, like 30 plus minutes, I would say. If Boogie comes in, I would slot him at that one spot and put Seth next to him at the two. Boogie also maybe not as efficient as a shooter as Kyan overall, but he rated by Synergy 99 percentile on catch and shoot,
Mm.
um, and not nearly as efficient off the dribble. But somebody that he has a really good shooting stroke. His thing is more he's a tough shot taker and maker, but he's a New York guard. So he's one of those guys that I think my question would be, how does Hubert handle that? Typically, he's given those guys a lot of freedom and a lot of room to operate and make mistakes, which you got to balance that with helping them understand what a good shot selection is
Hmm.
and how to kind of coach some of those really tough unnecessary shots out of your system, because he'll take some tough ones mid-range 3 point, like he'll just let it rip. So he's a much better shooter than he's shown overall. He also has a 30% assist rate, really dynamic playmaker as well. And right now, this team doesn't have somebody who's got experience at least effectively running pick and roll action. And with Vasar and with Wilson, I mean, these guys are lob threats every day of the week. So having a dynamic playmaker next to those guys who can also shoot it, that would be ideal. You start to run into an issue of what is the money kind of as you start adding this
Oh
all
yeah, there's
up.
money involved in this.
Right.
We're just throwing
Like
stuff around.
how many more pieces can you really add? And so can you really add two of these guys, right? Could you add Drake back and Boogie Flan?
Hmm.
I don't know, but Boogie certainly would fill a need in that guard area and give you a lot more depth, and I think answer questions around shooting and playmaking that are still holes or needs in the backcourt. And then from the wing perspective, you'd have to figure out kind of with what you have in terms of Jonathan Powell, Stevenson, and Wilson, how do you make that work? Um, but the dream scenario would be Drake comes back and you can get a Boogie Fland as well. I don't know if that's realistic, but I don't think it's impossible
Hmm.
either. So that's the latest, fan dream from the outside looking in
Yeah,
of what
yeah.
we hope happens. I think there's also just a sense that we're waiting for more smoke to come up with different guys. And in some ways, they're kind of resetting here as the portal is now closed and you kind of look at who's still available. And there probably still has been some back channeling going on, or even in other cases, Um, some of these relationships, like with Boogie Fland, have been long lasting over a couple of years. So the chances are there's other targets who will emerge. I really don't think that they can be or are done at this point.
Mhm.
And I think if you just stay with the roster that they have, there's significant holes and questions on the wing and I would even say in the guard slots, where I feel like you want one more experienced guy. Um, that I would have a lot of questions going into the year. So I'm
Mhm.
hopeful they'll keep working the portal, keep kind of waiting on some of these guys to come out of the draft and then go from there. But man,
Mm.
Boogie would be electric,
There
and
it
certainly
is. I was
there.
waiting for some kind of bad joke to sneak in there. I avoided it when I was going to do the introduction, but I figured you check that box.
Yeah, even unintentionally. I mean, he just like he's. I love New York guards, so I'm a sucker
Yeah.
for New York guards, and he's just another one of those guys. But he is such a smooth shooter that would be like you just I just feel like you need one more shooter next to the guys that they have,
Mhm.
especially with guys like Seth and Caleb Wilson, who we just have questions about their shooting coming into the year. Jaren Stevenson too. So you want to have at least, I think, one more reliable shooting option if you can have it, and he would definitely satisfy that need.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on all that. Obviously, as Jay kind of broke down for us, and hey, we appreciate it. Your insight is always incredibly insightful and helpful for everybody. So, um, all that to say, there's just a lot of moving parts still in this portal. I would agree. I do expect a couple more pieces to come together. This draft process is a big part of it. I'm sure behind the scenes, balancing the money versus the timelines versus the visits versus the interest is just a whole formula that Jim Tanner and team are trying to figure out as best they could. If you're a fan, at least this is my perspective right now, is that I feel much better about the progress that has been made in this offseason compared to last season, which felt very stagnant. It felt like there was misses. It felt like we got Cade, but he, is a small team player from Belmont who comes up. That didn't end up translating. At the time, we didn't expect that, but now you kind of are getting a little bit more insight into what might work and what might work really well and who might excel. And so I think I'd grade it. I don't know if we're fully there yet, but I'd say we're looking at a B grade right now. Maybe a low B, but that can quickly bump up more toward an A if we get just that one extra piece or two with somebody returning in Drake. And then you're looking at a really competitive team. All this to say also that can you even think about one reason why early top 25, way too early polls should come out now? They mean absolutely nothing. Baylor didn't even have a team. How do you even rank them, 300th when they had zero players on their roster a few weeks ago?
Well, this gives me a chance to reference yet another podcast. I'm going to reference all the ones that I listen to, but Tate Frazier talks about this a lot on One Shining Podcast, which is there should absolutely not be early top 25, right? Early top 25 polls because yeah, to quote John Calipari, as we like to do this time of year, I talked to the team. There is no team. It's literally like you're right. It's Baylor's situation. There's other teams like this. When
Yeah,
coaches
yeah.
leave, everyone leaves with them now. And I mean, the plus side is if you have a lot of turnover, which Carolina now, um, you look at their end of season starting lineup. There's a chance that all five of their end of season starters will not be in the lineup this year. You could get Lubin back, you could get Drake back, and certainly Seth started a lot of games before he got injured. But that's just a different level of turnover. But you can do so much in the portal that you can really offset a lot of that. But it is just such a unique time in terms of in terms of the way that looks. And Ven-Allen Lubin, I think, is um, the way he's going about the portal process, which was a little bit of a surprise, I think, to a lot of people, including me, is unique in of itself. That to have somebody say, "I'm in the portal, but my plan and goal and want is to come back to UNC." That's the first time that we've seen that, and we'll
Mhm.
see how that sorts itself out.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a strange one. I saw that tweet come out, and I think I was going to send it to you right as you sent it to me, and it was like, this is dot 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 interesting. Not exactly sure how to assess it. It's very, confusing when it comes out. There are so many issues with payments and legalities around who and when gets paid and where it comes from, all of that. So again, trust Jim Tanner and the team that they're doing the right thing. The trajectory right now is in a very positive direction. It's just a matter of back when I worked in news, we had this phrase called "hurry up and wait." You feel like you're not doing anything, and then suddenly you're 90 miles per hour, go, go, go. It's the same thing. Yeah, it could be a week off, and then it's, oh, what do you mean two guys transferred out and we got one more visit in the coming days? And so it's a lot to keep up with, but overall, it's just a matter of patience and everything sorting itself out. So, what are your thoughts on if Ven-Allen Lubin comes back, where does he fit in if he ends up not coming back? How does that affect this team? And then anything else you want to say on Drake or Ian? I'm on a side note, I think Ian's going to be a great fit at St. John's in the Rick Pitino system. Really excited for him to be back in New York state of mind and playing up there for Rick Pitino. I was all in on the Johnnies when UNC was struggling, and then when they got that 2 seed, it did not end up as well as I thought. Their offense just couldn't keep up. I was really invested in their defense, kind of like I had thought about for Houston. Houston did make that run. St. John's didn't. But maybe this year for the Johnnies, if they can invest in guys like Ian Jackson and get some offense out of them, Patino's going to coach the defense. So good fit for him. But what are your thoughts on Lubin first, and then anything additional you want to add on the two freshmen that we lost?
Well, I think the thing with Lubin, first of all, is that now he's in the portal. UNC doesn't have to hold his spot or honor the previous agreement. So
Yeah, that's big.
while his goal is to come back to Carolina, it really puts that in jeopardy. Whereas if you were focused on that primarily, then sticking to the previous deal. But I get it. I mean, we
Mhm.
don't know all the behind the scenes things or the things that he's needing or wanting from this process. Um, I think the other thing to touch on with that really quick with the house settlement coming up in the way that revenue sharing is going to enter into college sports soon. Originally that date for that hearing was April 7th, so it was thought that that was going to be settled by then. But the question I have and the confusion I have with Lubin even entering the portal and citing that I'm waiting on the house deal in terms of that piece of it to be settled. If he's talking about his NIL package, the NIL package, my understanding was that any NIL deal, say that 5 times fast, any NIL deal would go through a clearinghouse, and it sounds like Deloitte is going to be the company that handles the clearinghouse to check that these deals are fair market value. But that doesn't go into effect until after the settlement is passed. That's my understanding. So as a result, we saw a lot of deals getting done before the 7th to make sure they were in place so that you wouldn't have to go through the clearinghouse. So that's where I'm confused, and that's just more of a me thing of I'm just curious to know all the little like details of why this is happening the way that it is. In terms of his fit, he is the perfect, like the ideal backup five for this team. He showed down the stretch what he can do, and
Mhm.
and
Agreed.
that even though he's 6'8" and he's not an elite athlete, he is a good enough athlete for this level, and he's got a good wingspan. He uses his body really well to
I love
score
the
20 and
aggression too. I mean, by the end of the
yeah,
year, he was just going at it, and that's what was getting it done. And you need that.
ripping off the rim, very decisive. He also just uses his body well, very physical in the paint, takes good angles. To have 20 and 10 against Malawach in that ACC tournament game, you're going up against a 7-2 guy who's known for being a rim protector. That was really impressive. And that wasn't the only game that he had like that. So if you can bring a guy like that off the bench for 10 or 15 minutes, because the truth is Vasar has not been the guy for a full season. So while you'd want him, I think, ideally to play 30 minutes, it may be that he's more of a 25-minute guy and you can rely on a Lubin for 15 minutes off the bench at the five. Um, so he gives offensively, he gives you a very efficient player, somebody who finishes really, really well at the rim. We've seen that what he can do in the pick and roll game. He had some issues early with catching passes, but really, I think cleaned that up towards the end. Um, not going to be a shooter. He's not somebody who want to space the floor. We saw even the mascot Ramsey's reaction to his 3-point shot in the tournament game against Duke. But I mean, the guy is a warrior. He battles. He battles on defense too. He's
Yeah.
not an elite defender, but he's going to make you work. He's going to win some battles and he's going to lose some, but he's going to make you work for what you get. So you like to have a guy like that on your team. And I mean, that would be a heck of a backup to have. The problem is, if that's not what he has in mind, if he feels like, no, I want to be a starter and I want to keep that starting spot, then maybe this isn't the right situation. And in that case, what does Carolina do? You could try to find another backup, but really what they're looking at the wing too is the replacement we're going to find better than what we already have? Because if it's not, do you really go out and get somebody who's not at the level of James Brown? I think it's fair to say we just have not seen enough from James Brown. Very inexperienced, still developing. So I mean, that's just an example, right, of one of the guys who is coming
Sure.
back. I think it would be more likely if Lubin leaves that you probably go with Stevenson, a combination of Stevenson and Zayden High, who it appears he is coming back. As somebody, both of those guys can toggle between the 4 and the 5 a little bit defensively. That's not like their ideal position. They're both 4s, but you can make that work. So that would be potentially a direction they could go. But ideally, it's Lubin because he is a really
Hmm.
solid backup. And the pairing with him and Vasar, you kind of get a different approach from both of those guys. You have the extremely skilled, bouncy 7-footer who can do a little bit of everything, shooting, passing, also rips the rim off on lobs and finishes. He threw one off the backboard to himself in one of the games I watched.
Hmm.
And then Lubin, who he's punishing at the rim, very efficient and a good interior presence on offense and a grinder on defense. That's a really solid front court at the 5. I mean, front court overall, I would have to give like an A, maybe even A
Yeah.
plus, depending on if those guys all reach their potential. If Lubin comes back, if
Yeah.
not, it's still really solid. But you'd love to have that type of reliability and consistency behind your star center.
Yeah, for sure. He would be an essential piece just to really make sure that front court is locked up. And again, all the more reason to lock up the front court is to free up that back court. So a couple more pieces to hopefully fall into place here. But Jonathan, super appreciate the insight. You're keeping me up to speed, keeping the listeners up to speed, all of it. I think it's just a really exciting time to be jumping into season 3 of the pod, honestly, and doing this again. And we started 2 years ago in May, and it was the Harrison Ingram pickup, and it was Cormac, and it was the nonstop news. And last season was a little different. It felt a little bit more down. Maybe we should have trusted our gut, like, hey, something's not right. But we always hype ourselves up. We almost come back against Kansas. We, get into the season all hyped. Didn't exactly go the way everybody planned, but you got to at least think that where we are now yields to a pretty good start to the year if we lock down one or two more of these pieces. Again, who knows if it's a Hubert issue? Who knows if it's not, right? But this, to me, for people who have questions about Hubert, if you get everything in place, you go into the season and you deal with the same struggles, those are then very fair questions to ask. But right now, it seems like we're getting the pieces. We tighten up this roster, and then we see what Hubert can do with it with a clean slate. And then I think we kind of go from there because obviously that's on a lot of fans' minds still,
As it should be. I mean, I'm sure it's
and
on his
ours
mind
too.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, this is it. This is the make or break season. And so I think that's where some of the criticism comes in when we maybe don't get a player that we were hoping to, or don't go after a player that, let's say Jameer Watkins is an example. Like if we don't make a push for Jameer Watkins, there are going to be folks who are upset. And I get it. Like we just want the best pieces to come into this team. Um, so I agree. I think to set Hubert up to have the best chance of success this year, you need to get one or two more solid pieces. Ideally, a starter at the wing and then a backup guard is what I'd be looking for. But pieces you have are solid. I'd say the same thing as you said, low B or B. It was higher when I thought Drake was coming back.
yeah, yeah. It
Like
felt
like
felt a little better.
even without him on the roster for sure, I was like, well, without him, B, even B plus. I was just feeling more optimistic. But if he comes back, then you're looking more like a low A, and you just need maybe one more piece if
Yeah,
you can get it. Yeah, in terms of Drake, we'll see what happens. In terms of Ian, like you said, I,
you're
I
all in on
love
the
Ian
Johnnies too.
Jackson.
Come on,
I'm
join
all
me.
in. Yeah, that is if he was going to leave, which I didn't want him to leave, and I know there are some mixed feelings about just the way the season went and all of those things. From from the fan base even about Ian Jackson or how he left. But for me, him being from New York, like that was the perfect fit for him to go to St. John's. His two of his best games were one was at Syracuse, one was in Madison Square Garden against UCLA.
Right.
So I think he can back to being electric. I think he can be completely like he's an electric player. It's going to be Showtime TV to watch that guy. Can he be a point guard? I would have a lot of questions about that, but he's at least he's going to get his opportunity according to Rick Pitino. So good for him. He's going to be able
Yeah.
to, see, can I do this? Can I make this happen at this level? And defensively, if he doesn't buy in on defense, there's going to be a treadmill with his name engraved on it every practice. So
Hmm.
he might as well just live in the gym if he doesn't buy in on defense. I think it's a great fit. I'm excited to see how it goes. They have some really interesting pieces transferring in, and Rick always seems to find a way with his wizardry to
He
put it
does.
all together.
Yeah, I mean, he's a legendary coach. Love him or hate him. A lot of people feel either, really hot or really cold on him. And I get it. I get it. He's a very polarizing figure at times, but he really supports his players. And what I saw from him supporting the Johnnies and the team and some of the interviews that John Fanta did with him, he just ended up being very likable. It's almost like he's in his like little retirement job right now, is what it feels like. Kind of like Jim
No,
Boeheim on the broadcast. He's just loose.
it's a completely that. I mean, the guy is showing up at Yankees games. He's showing up at every event in the city. He is
He looks
like the
happy. Yeah.
mayor, the honorary mayor of the city of New York, or at least of Queens or Flushing or wherever. But yeah, I mean, he is having the time of his life. I also love they're like very much a politician zooming in on his desk when he does video announcements and just has like fireside chat with Rick
Yeah,
Pitino when he's
totally.
announcing news or when Mark Pope was announced at Kentucky, since that was one of his players on that championship team at Kentucky. He giving his little monologue to the Kentucky faithful of like, get behind Mark Pope. It really just felt like a politician who's about to announce that he's actively becoming a candidate. I'm all in on Patino. It's just fun to watch from afar. So I'll be more connected now that Ian's there. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough to see these guys that you get excited about as a recruit. You watch for so long in high school, get excited about them coming in, and then you just don't know how long they're going to be at UNC, and this is just part of it, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that eventually, maybe it's not next year, but before too long, we see Carolina back in the Final Four because there's nothing like seeing Carolina Final Four weekend and actually being in it. It's just a different energy. But second to that is when your most hated rival loses in the most unimaginable, just you could never dream it up in a million years fashion
The games
of
where the Duke fans are turning it off and going to bed because it's a late start and they don't need to watch anymore. And then they wake up and say, wait a minute.
I mean, well, that was we recorded Friday, the last recorded Friday.
Hmm.
Game was Saturday. I had COVID for the first time ever, 5 years later,
Welcome.
and I yeah, 0 out of 10. I do not recommend. It was terrible, and I was like, I gotta go to bed. But then the game hooked me in, even though I was like, they're gonna pull this out. They're not gonna come back. But I was rewarded for that last 2 to 3 minutes, and I still can't believe I have to watch it again maybe this weekend to really understand what exactly happened. I
Seriously.
mean,
It's that defense, man.
everything,
Defense wins championships,
the
or at least close
defense,
to.
it was the defense, but Duke just, I mean, they literally made mistakes that you cannot make in that situation. And yeah, I couldn't have been happier as a
Yeah.
Carolina fan.
I'm pretty sure you called me after it. We probably stayed up till from like 12 to 1 just chit-chatting about the game and how much joy it brought us and college basketball in general. Life feels good again.
Yeah, well,
You
because
gotta you gotta embrace it. Yeah.
it really felt like the whole season was foreshadowing what was going to happen in the championship, right? Like this
Yeah.
was, they were a wagon. It was going in one direction. And my only hope was if Houston couldn't do it, that then I was like, I want to see, whatever their Chris Jenkins version of heartbreak was going to be in the national championship. That's what I want. I want a
Yeah.
buzzer beater. I want Walter Clayton
Give me all
Jr.,
of it. Yep.
improbable off balance for three at the buzzer, and you just never recover from it. There's always a scar there. So that's what I was hanging on to because it didn't look good, and then things got even better. Like I don't think I could have
We've
imagined
peaked.
that. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
that quote Jay Billis, that delivered. That was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm losing words because it just made me so happy.
Yeah. Hey, not that we have any Duke fan listeners, maybe one in your buddy Isaac Shu. But if he's listening, he's probably thinking, oh, these Carolina guys just focused on Duke rent free. No, both can be true. I am disappointed by our season, and I take great joy in the fact that you lost that way in the Final Four. That's the rivalry, man.
Well, it is, and he'd be, or any Duke fan, be the first to remind you how many points we were ahead by at halftime against Kansas in 22. Um,
Totally.
and completely leave out the fact that the reason why we were even there is we beat Duke in the process. So that
As
is
an eight
just
seed.
right. That just is talk about rough Final Four losses. That that is just the rivalry. It's what it is. And so the next time Carolina's in and Duke's not, the same thing's going to
Totally.
happen. And when both are in and State still isn't, the same thing's going to happen with State. So yeah, it's just what it is being a fan. But that was so unexpected. And one of my outside of Carolina championships or Final Four runs, one of my favorite Final Fours, I think, because of just how. And then I went down the
Uh,
rabbit hole of like, was this the worst loss in Duke tournament history? And I think that it was, but I came up with like three or four other ones that were really bad also.
First
Um,
rounders, maybe?
those are the first rounders. They were up by 17 points in the Sweet 16 against Indiana in Jason Williams' senior year, and we're down four. He hits a three. I can't remember, like a couple seconds left. Mike Davis was coaching Indiana, lost his mind. You cannot foul in that situation. Jason has a chance to tie it, go to overtime. Clearly, they're going to win, and he clanks the free throw, very Tyrese Proctor-esque, and that was it. And that's the end of his career. So that one was up there for me. Sorry to rub salt in the wound, Jay. I know you were upset about this year too.
Did he call a
Um,
timeout before the free throw?
he should have. Maybe.
He probably should have.
Or he might have iced himself. Either way, it didn't work out for him. It was a heck of a shot. Like the fact they were in that situation and had a chance was pretty impressive. But they've
Yeah.
had a few. They were up by
Hmm.
18 against Seton Hall in 1989, I think it was, and lost. So they've had their share of disappointments. But to be fair, that is how it goes when you're in that many tournaments, in that many big situations. We've had our share, obviously, of
Of course.
disappointments too. But I'm not going to let any of them ever forget it. Ever. This was
No.
your generational guy. This was the unicorn. This is the next LeBron James or whatever, the next generational player, the greatest thing that's ever happened. He's dominating guys on the USA team in the summertime. Look at what, he should have been on the Olympic team. He probably could be in the league now. And in late game situations with the game on the line and the ball in his hands, he doesn't come through five times out of five.
Yeah.
Twice in the Kentucky game and three other games where they had the game a chance to win that they lost.
Clemson.
So,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, and look, I don't have anything against Cooper. He just happened to play for Duke, and so that's
Yeah.
really
No, he was exciting to watch. I'm not gonna lie. He was kind of fun to watch when I was like, well, they're already up by 20 and I already know they're gonna win. And then Cooper's just doing his thing. I'm like, yeah, I get it. He's impressive. At the same time, I don't mind that you came up a foot short on that shot in the front rim. Totally fine by me.
as loud and in your face as Kelly Flagg was for the latter half of the
That's the thing,
season.
man. That's the thing.
Did you see the image of her just disappearing, falling back into her seat after that
No.
shot when they knew it was over? Oh yeah, it was very much like Homer into the bushes type of thing. And then I
Incredible.
don't think we didn't see her ever again. There was no camera on her.
No, there
There was no
wasn't.
golf cart in this situation. There was no riding into the sunset. Although there
Yeah.
was a golf cart for Cooper and Kahn as they rode into the sunset. Very Coach K-esque. So yeah. I mean, again, it could not have ended in a more heartbreaking fashion, and
Yeah.
for that reason, it was the perfect ending to a frustrating Carolina basketball season.
It was. And then unfortunately the next game, Houston, we have a problem. We're doing the same
Yeah,
thing that we just came back on against Duke. But Florida deserved it. I remember saw them in the first round game at Lenovo Center and I mean, granted they're playing a 16 seed, but I was like, this team has a lot of factors, and I forgot how impressive Walter Clayton Jr. is, and the fact that he was able to, take his team all the way, well deserved. Um, Todd Golden gets his first championship. So either way, you were having Kelvin Sampson or Todd get there first, which is a cool story. Really would have preferred it for Kelvin, given how long he's been in the game, how
yeah.
close he's been. North Carolina ties, just seems like
Hmm.
a genuinely great guy. But you know, it is what it is. That's sport. That's why we love it. That's why we hate it, depending on the day. So that's all I got on the NCAA, man. You took it away. I fully agree, and I fully expected you to do so. It's like it's been boiling right there for 2 weeks, and it feels like a month and a half ago that this championship game was, but it was really only, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, there's that much that happens in the portal since then.
Seriously,
Yeah, and then it is just a surreal feeling of like we're not going to see these guys in their uniforms again, right? The guys who are
it
going on
just
to the
happened so
pros.
quick. Yeah,
It does. And RJ Davis, all the guys that we've talked about, but and we have had a chance to point them out, which has been good because it was just a joy to watch somebody like RJ play at Carolina. But for the start of season three, we want to point out to you all, the listeners, because y'all have
absolutely.
been with us, whether you just started with us, if this is your first episode, or you caught us back from the very beginning when we started, when we just sort of turned on the microphones and said, let's just
We should
sort
be
of record
recording
and see
these
what
phone conversations.
yeah,
Yeah.
see what happens. It's been a lot of fun, and I know you had some thoughts just to share with our listeners, what it's meant to you too along the way, also.
Yeah, I'm just appreciative. I never fully expect to, have this as something that we do paid full time, and that was never the goal of this. The goal of this was to have two, hopefully most of the time, reasonable voices in the room that provide some insight, try to avoid hot takes. That was always our thing from the very start. And hopefully just, be relatable. You guys are all fans out there. We try to be fans with a little bit of crazy inside us in terms of how much fandom we have and how much we dig into stats and like to track trends and foreshadow what's going to happen and look back, and we just try to improve every episode and every year. I think it's just been a good outlet for the both of us, but what really keeps us going, I know we treat it like a therapy session for basketball sometimes, but what really keeps us going is engaging with all the fans and knowing that, some others are getting some joy out of it. So when you send us a random X or tweet that you're listening to our show or looking forward to the next one, it may seem like a little thing, but we super appreciate it. It means a lot. So just gonna keep it going, and hopefully, who knows, we have to do an emergency pod tomorrow because we get Boogie Flint. I don't know. I'm prepared for it, but that's the life of a podcaster and a sports podcaster, because it's very reactive, especially right now.
I think with him and Drake, you're going to want to set that for that last week in May, sometime before the 28th. That'll be when probably that news drops. But yeah, I'm ready. If something wild happens and Andre decides that Illinois is not the place for him, then we'll be outside of Charlottesville this weekend. But I will be happy to get from the river or mountain or wherever and get on the microphone. We need to talk about it if that
That's right.
happens.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I just want to point out to all the listeners, like Jonathan said, new or old or somewhere in between, we really, really appreciate it. Carolina family is what it's all about, and we look forward to keeping you guys updated this off season. As always, with the summer podcast, it's rules changes and game announcements and matchups. Obviously, we'll be hosting Kansas this year. That'll be a big one early on in November. But as the ACC schedule comes out, as non-con continues to get finalized, all of that we'll have on our radar and make sure to keep you guys updated. So, Jay, any last thoughts?
That's it for me. As always, whether it's in season, out of season, we love the Tar Heels. We love following it all. And yeah, big go Heels for me. Can't wait to see who we get for the rest of the transfer portal cycle.
Absolutely. Go Heels.